I am so ready for this game, this sci-fi RPG, that I'm hanging on to every update we get. Exodus, the game in development from former Mass Effect developers, is getting pretty freaking interesting. I've gone on a bit of a roller coaster with this game. When it was first announced back at the Game Awards, well, I completely dismissed it. Straight up forgot about it, in all honesty. I figured it'd be some new game trying to cash in on celebrity that would ultimately flop. It's kind of what happens when you announce your game through celebrity. But after a few consistent months of developer interviews saying the right things, new reveals, flashy trailers, and interesting homages to Mass Effect, I'm into it. I'm intrigued. I want to know more. Only problem is every time I Google the damn game, all I get are Bible quotes. I've covered some of the cooler parts of this game in another video. I'll link down below covering its time dilation mechanic, which we will talk about a little bit, the excellent writers behind it like Drew Karpyshyn, who wrote some of your favorite sci-fi stories if you like Mass Effect or Star Wars. But still, to catch you up to speed real quick, just in case you have no idea what this game is about, and you just kind of clicked on this video randomly because, I don't know, it's space and RPGs, well, let's cover a couple of the little basics. Exodus is an upcoming sci-fi RPG that is deeply story-driven with lots of choice and consequence. It will center around a time travel mechanic, and it will be a companion-based RPG. It's a game where there has been an exodus from Earth and creatures have evolved over tens of thousands of years, leading to things like the enlightened pig and bear, and these god-awful, hideous things.
Hunting for isolated targets. And unfortunately for their victims, the Mariyama are interested in more than just stealing cargo. They want minds, memories, emotions. The more twisted and tortured, the better. Captured prey will be subjected to intense psychological torment before being neurologically drained. Those rare few who the Mariyama allowed to survive and escape often never return to space, for they know too well the terror that lurks out there, in the dark, between the stars.
Like, seriously, what the like nightmare fuel shit is that? What is that thing? Why does it have hands and faces? Why? But now that you're up to speed and you'll have nightmares later, apologies, but you know, that's how things go, right? Let's talk about some of the QA, the questions and answers we've been getting over the last couple of months from Exodus, and some of the things they've revealed about stuff like companions, time travel, decision-making, gameplay, and even maybe something possibly about a gameplay trailer. Let's start with the companions. One of the first questions asked was, can players bring the same companions on missions, or will they need to change as we move through time? Now, before we get to their answer, this is one I was very curious about because the whole idea is that you're this time traveler, but it's also a companion-based game. How is this going to impact your relationships with your companions? Will you be able to take them with you at all times, or will you have to leave them behind? Will they forget who you are? Will they die? I can't recall a game doing something like this before, so I was very keen to hear their answer, which was nothing really. When this question was first asked, the answer had nothing to do with the question. The answer we got was essentially that they have a tremendous cast of companions who are diverse, including some non-humans.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello. Hi. Hi.
But not to be deterred, people came back with a question that was a bit more pointed. If decades pass for loved ones left behind during traveler missions, is there a never-ending roster of new characters to meet every time you return home? Now, this didn't specifically address companions because we talked about companions as well as loved ones being left behind during these missions. But thankfully, we kind of got the answer anyway. An answer that really, within the first few seconds, you get a big hint as to how companions will function in Exodus.
With the passage of decades in Exodus, there's definitely going to be the introduction of new characters in the game, but there's also a core that will be with you throughout the entire journey. That's really important to us because we want to build emotional connections with your companions, your loved ones, and other main characters in the game. And so you're going to see those evolve with you because some of them are going to go on your journeys with you and some will stay home. But ultimately, there's that core that you're going to see again and again and build deep foundational relationships in addition to new ones that you'll see when you come back home and in other aspects of the game. So we're super excited about unveiling that to players.
It was here that honestly, I just breathed a huge sigh of relief, because if the game largely centered solely around your character, it could still be a fun game, but it wouldn't feel like the game coming from the places it's coming from, notably from Mass Effect. Perhaps one of the largest, if not the largest sci-fi RPGs out there, which coincidentally has its 5th installment in the works. Credit to Halo as well, a game that doesn't have companions. It was also a very big sci-fi action RPG, if you want to call it FPS, whatever you want to call it. It has a story. You could call it an RPG. Someone's going to argue in the comment section that it's not an RPG, I'm sure, but it could be an RPG. So companions should be central to the game, and you should have a core group of companions. But let's talk about the big mechanic to the game: time travel. I wanted to spend at least some time in this video talking about it because it's so central, and I think there's one key answer about it that encompasses just how important it's going to be for the game from the September Q&A. The question is essentially, will there be a correlation between choices made and story progression? The answer is essentially that yes, it will touch on everything. Choices you make in different timelines will have consequences for loved ones you leave back home. Progression options for your character will be altered. Even your home world and civilization will be impacted by those choices, which honestly makes me think a lot of a book that I read called Dark Matter, which has all these kind of different world states, essentially, as like all these like butterfly effects things start to happen. And I think it's one of the things that I find that could be really interesting in this game if done well, because you're stretching out the normal type of RPG experience over a long period of time, which gives a lot more room for variability. So in a normal RPG, you could have like, I make this decision and it's in Act 1, and in Act 3, there's gonna be some kind of thing that happens based off what happened in Act 1. And yes, that's a really impactful thing. But what if your decision in Act 1 had to do with a generational change that you see in Act 3 that you had no idea what happened? Say, for example, just throwing this out there because it's not something that they have said, it's just an example that's coming to my mind. Let's say you have 2 companions in Act 1 and one of them has to die. You have to leave one of them behind. Well, what if in their lineage, that one companion, the companion you decide to save, well, what if their great-great-grandchild turns out to be a piece of shit awful person that takes over your entire civilization? So maybe your decision making to save one companion, while at the time seems like a great decision, or a tough decision depending on how it goes, but then there's this unexpected variable thing that there's no way you could account for. You know, it adds a lot more playroom, I think. But the other side of that is it could also come across as gimmicky. It could come across as this huge gimmick that doesn't really add anything new to the RPG experience. I'm excited about it, so I'm leaning towards it not coming across as gimmicky, but we'll just have to see exactly how it plays out, right? But there's one part of it that I think is leaning me more towards that direction than others, and it has to do with some of the gameplay. Throughout all the QAs, choice is at the forefront, and so is consequence. And this plays out in the use of some different gameplay mechanics, like something called silicates, which is an alien life form that forms a symbiotic relationship with humans. And you know what, honestly, silicates probably deserves their own video because it sounds kind of cool and interesting. But I wanted to put up this quote from James Olin about them in game.
Silicates are they're really cool, and they're going to be one of those things that I think people will remember about the game. However, I can't really talk too much about them because I don't want to spoil anything, but I can say that the choices you make in the game will have a huge impact on how silicates appear in the game. So you might be talking to your buddy who's also playing Exodus, and he'll describe your experience with silicates, and he'll be like, what? That's nothing like what's happening, in his version of the game. It's actually pretty cool. There's one choice in particular that is just has massive consequences that span centuries.
Now at this point, I was already sold, I was already happy, I was already excited, because what this brings up to me is a memory of perhaps my favorite RPG, okay, it is my favorite RPG of all time, Baldur's Gate 3. And it's rude and a little unfair to compare a game to Baldur's Gate 3 at this point, but what it brings to mind is an experience I had where I had this awful experience in the game where it felt so right, it felt so tied to the story that this massacre where all these people, like tons of people died, I thought that was how the game was supposed to go. Like that was a canon event. That was part of what is supposed to happen in the game, and there's no way to avert it, until my friend told me that that's not the case. And everyone that I died in my game is alive and well and dancing and happy and selling them loot later on in the game in Act 3. But that's kind of what I'm hoping this would mean, that you can have a moment like that. Maybe not necessarily a massacre type moment, but maybe a moment like, oh, well, this happened in my game because I made these choices with the silica or whatever, and a friend can have an entirely different playthrough because they made different choices. I don't know if it's fair to bring up the specter of Baldur's Gate 3. It's probably not. But when you talk about choice like that, where one person's game is drastically different from another person's game, that's what comes to mind. Where it's going to be different, and perhaps in a good way, especially with a sci-fi RPG, is how the game is going to be structured, gameplay-wise. Everything I'm hearing about the game so far really sounds like it's kind of mission-based, not trying the Starfield Star Citizen route of open space, but rather more confined. Go out and find a celestial remnant, come back home and decide what to do with it. Do you turn it into weapons to use against the Celestials? Do you use it to help expand scientific discovery for humanity? And this is, I think, part of why I'm so excited about this game. The mission-based structure like this in a sci-fi RPG, I think, is more conducive to storytelling. I struggled mightily with the openness to Starfield because I felt like I had very little direction in what to do, and the directions I did have weren't compelling at all. Exodus will not have open space exploration. There's just going to be too much urgency to the game. You can't just go fuck off to some other planet to pick some weeds, because doing so probably means your planet has gone and done an Alderaan, and everyone you know and care for is freaking dead. There's just more urgency. But one of the most important parts of that is, as you're going through all these missions, as you're doing all these, as you have your companions, as you're dealing with all this time dilation, well, who the hell are you? Who's the character? Who's the protagonist? We know at this point that the protagonist is named June, something that was kind of explained a bit in the November Q&A.
The level of personality that a character might have in a role-playing game is really dependent upon the kind of role-playing game, and it kind of goes on a scale. On one end, you have like massive multiplayer games or Skyrim, where you really can imagine yourself or your character, your avatar, as almost anything you want. On the other side of the spectrum, you have like Final Fantasy or the Square Enix games, where your character's name and gender and everything is decided for you in personality. So at Bioware, we had two kind of different types of franchises. One was the Dragon Age, one was the Mass Effect, and Dragon Age we allowed more character customizability. It was more important because Dragon Age was kind of like a spiritual successor to the Baldur's Gate franchise, and that was important. Mass Effect was more authorial in how the personality was developed, as in, the developers gave Shepard more of a personality. With our game, we are leaning more towards the Bioware science fiction game. You're still going to be able to obviously make choices with a lot of cinematics and where you're fully voiced, We want to have lots of drama. That's hard to do if you don't have a personality. Anyways.
So this is not going to do anything to stop the inevitable comparisons between Exodus and Mass Effect. Is June going to be our new Shepard? I kind of hope so, because Shepard was a great character, and I really hope that they can kind of pull in from that experience they have with that specific game, with those, because you have a lot of talent from Mass Effect 1 and 2 on this game specifically, as well as writing from those games. So I really hope we get something compelling like that. I also hope this means that June can be a woman or a man when it comes down to it. I really hope that there are going to be those options in this game to allow you to have what is basically the same kind of compelling story, whether your character is going to be voiced by Jennifer Hale or voiced by Mark Meer. My fingers are crossed that we get something like that. It would be fantastic. And I know it's a little on the nose for Mass Effect, but I would really, it's something that I really think is a great way to expand the RPG elements of the game. But now that we know so much about the game, when the hell are we actually going to see anything about it? Well, there's a slight hope, and it's mostly just reading between the lines. One of the biggest issues with the game so far, at least from a marketing perspective and, well, a player perspective, is the lack of actual gameplay we have seen. We've gotten some tiny little snippets here and there, but we don't have a full-on trailer. Most of what we have seen, 90% of what we're seeing or more, has been cinematics. 90% of what you're seeing as B-roll in this are cinematics. All we've been told in the QA is that a date for a gameplay trailer exists. They just can't tell us yet. However, they end the November Q&A by saying that more news is coming in December. What that means is kind of up to debate. It could just mean that they have another QA, or maybe they're revealing something else. They've done a couple different reveal videos of like revealing the enlightened bear, revealing the creepy aliens. So basically it could just be something like that. And it's not out of the realm of possibility. But there's also one other thing happening in December.
And the Game Award goes to... And the Game Award goes to...
And that's the Game Awards. The Game Awards are happening on December 12th. And if there's a prime place in December to drop a gameplay trailer, it's gonna be the Game Awards. And maybe they can slot it in right before, I don't know, they give Elden Ring's DLC Game of the Year, since they just made that change. But you know what? If you want to vote on your own scuffed Game Awards, well, I have a show for you. They'll be coming on December 7th. That show is my show with my friend and co-host, Mr. Guybrush, which we'll be hosting over on Twitch. And you can actually vote in that show right down below in the link provided. It's for the scuffedgameawards.com. You can vote for legacy RPGs from the 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2020s, and RPG of the Year, as well as many other categories. You can also see the nominees for those categories in this video right here. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you very much, and I hope you have a great rest of your day, evening, whatever time it is. Time dilation, I don't fucking know. Something with that.